They don't allow you to speak about this. You're under court order not to, which, by the way, recently a federal judge tossed this out and said this just reeks of political targeting. Now, why is this political targeting going on? This requires a little bit of contextualization. As you know, the American left is obsessed with Citizens United, a decision that changed, let's just give it a shorthand, that changed the rules and regulations surrounding donations for political groups, how political money can be spent. And this all came together, you will recall, because a group wanted to air a video. They decided that they wanted to put forward a video about Hillary. It's called Hillary the Movie. It was a documentary that was going to air on DirecTV. It was a critical movie of Hillary Clinton. But, the movie violated restrictions of, quote, electioneering communications within 30 days of a primary. Now, keep in mind, Hollywood can make as many pro-anything movies as it wants. But you make a Hillary documentary, that's a problem. So you can make a movie that, let's say, is opposed to traditional marriage. You could make a movie about how we should all elevate transgenderism as a lifestyle or as a decision choice. You can do that, and that somehow doesn't in any way get covered by this. But you make a movie about how you think Hillary Clinton is a lying, shrill, cold, calculating harpy. That's a generalization, but something along those lines. That's covered under political speech restrictions. Well, the left freaked out about this. And just to give you a sense of how much they freaked out about it, for example, President Obama, in a moment that was disgusting even for him, he shamed the Supreme Court's 5 conservative-leaning, as they call them, justices because of the Citizens United v. Federal Election Commission decision. He said at a State of the Union address that it, quote, reversed a century of law that I believe will open the floodgates for special interests, including foreign corporations, to spend without limit in our elections. Fortunately, real constitutional law scholar who both understands and adheres to the Constitution, Justice Samuel Alito, said, not true. I would have said something with stronger language that probably would have had to be bleeped out at that point in time, but I appreciate the judge's respect for proper decorum. So Obama was absolutely apoplectic about this. And he said things like, quote, now ExxonMobil or Walmart can simply go to the district of a member of Congress who is giving them a hard time and spend as much money as it wants to defeat him. President Obama said that Citizens United was, quote, more devastating to the public interest than anything he could think of. Chuck Schumer said that if Democrats fail to overturn the ruling, we will, quote, have the Supreme Court predetermine the outcome of next November's election. They also compared the decision to Plessy versus Ferguson and Dred Scott. Yeah, Citizens United, just like the decision to uphold slavery. Brilliant constitutional analysis, Obama and acolytes. They compared it to Watergate as well. Anything to just sort of get the ignorant but earnest left into a frenzy. So all the hyperventilating, however, didn't seem to prevent them from themselves getting very involved in super PACs. In fact, as we found out later on, Citizens United then led to Priorities USA Action, which is the flagship Obama super PAC from the 2012 presidential campaign. They got a $2 million donation from movie mogul Jeffrey Katzenberg, for example. Eventually, George Soros started pouring in money. They started raking in 7- and 8-figure sums each month, and then became a tremendous force in the 501c4 world. They also, by the way, have an anonymous arm that did under-the-radar 501c4 nonprofit raising for nearly $9 million in 2012. This is Obama. But Obama also has taken his election campaign and now sort of spun it into a giant super PAC. Obama for America, Organizing for America. O and O. Aren't they so clever? They won the election despite Citizens United, and they held the Senate despite Citizens United. But now what do? They go after Scott Walker. They're looking to do this now. They're looking to make examples of people and use campaign finance law to crush a few high-level political opponents, because what they couldn't get from the Supreme Court, they hope to get from the prosecutor's office. When they couldn't get the judges to agree with them, they're trying to find other judges to agree with them. Now, Scott Walker's situation is that he supposedly coordinated with outside groups. And the prosecutors released 260 some odd pages saying that he was head of a criminal conspiracy, quote, except they're pressing no charges. And they've already had 2 judges go against them. The criminalization of politics is a threat to the heart of this republic. We're going to talk to a federal prosecutor about it in just a minute.
You're listening to Buck Sexton, only on the Blaze Radio Network.
Buck Sexton, only on the Blaze Radio Network.
So the John Doe investigations meant to take down Governor Scott Walker. Remember, Governor Scott Walker, who took on the unions, who survived the recall effort, the crazy unions taking over the state capitol, acting like Occupy Wall Street and all the rest. Well, 266 pages of documents have been released by the prosecutors there. There are 2 versions of events as to what that actually means. Here's the Wall Street Journal version. The news reports are, quote, jumping on snippets of some 266 pages of documents at the 7th Circuit Court of Appeals released to the public on Thursday. The breathless Page One stories claim that prosecutors believe Mr. Walker and his allies were part of a, quote, criminal scheme to coordinate their activities and thus violated campaign finance laws. The key point to understand is that this isn't an indictment and it isn't even evidence built into a legal case. It is merely a prosecutorial theory floated to justify a secret grand jury fishing expedition. The documents have been under seal, and they've been released only because of a federal civil rights lawsuit. But the document dump serves a political purpose that prosecutors intended from the start to tarnish Mr. Walker as he seeks re-election. Now, the New York Times, by contrast, says that this is all about that this is an instance where you see that there will be money in politics, bad, naughty, Scott Walker's a criminal, and all the rest. They take the completely opposite point of view on this. Well, I've got a federal prosecutor on the line who can bring us into reality here as to which side of this has more weight with them. We now have Andy McCarthy. He's, of course, a National Review columnist. He's the author of the book out now. You can get it on Amazon. Faithless Execution, Building the Case for Obama's Impeachment. And he's certainly doing his part for that case. Andy, thank you for joining.
Pleasure to be with you. How are you?
Good. Thanks. So I wanted to ask you, what do you make of this? I guess the 266 pages in the Walker investigation had to be released, but what really, they're just essentially now reporting on this as though somehow this proves that Walker did something wrong, when in reality, they've already been smacked down by a federal judge, I believe also a state judge, saying that this is a fishing expedition. And newspapers are reporting on the theory of the prosecutors who have been smacked down as though that's established fact. I mean, what do you make of all of this?
I make of it, Buck, that this is a good reason why ethical investigations, ethical criminal investigations take place under the cloak of grand jury secrecy. And it's precisely for this reason. The government should never be able to speak in public until they're ready to charge somebody and put on the table what their basis is for saying that there's probable cause that a crime got committed. You're quite right. This case got tossed by judges, and my recollection is that I believe the federal judge, may have been the state judge, who quashed subpoenas, said that there was no probable cause to allow what the fishing expedition that they wanted to do to go forward.
It was the federal judge. You're right, Andy. Yeah.
What you have is, and the New York Times would have been the first to run me out of town if I had done this. But if I had spun a theory about why, say, ex-Democrat office holder in New York was at the pinnacle of a corruption scheme, and then I tried to fill in the blanks with the evidence for that, and did that publicly, they would go crazy about prosecutors trying to taint people who were presumed innocent and convict them in the court of public opinion. And that should never happen. That's exactly why we have grand jury secrecy. It's to protect innocent people.
Right. So this is essentially like the prosecutors in this instance have written an editorial about their presumption that Scott Walker is head of what they call a criminal scheme. I mean, they want to put people in jail for this. And this comes out, and this is being reported on as though, well, that must be the reality of the case, when there's already been, it is a state judge and a federal judge have both completely smacked this down, and now they're trying to take it to an appeals level. But, Annie, it just seems like the left has this idea that they should go sort of judge shopping until they find someone who agrees with them, and then the media will pile on, and that will be what's considered the established fact. All you need is one.
Yeah, that's true. And then the other half of it, Buck, which is even more alarming, is they don't seem to see that there's any problem with politicizing the administration of justice and law enforcement processes in particular. There has to be political calculations involved in law enforcement, in the sense that, the executive branch, whether it's at the state level or the federal level, have to decide what their enforcement priorities are going to be, because there's a finite amount of resources, and you target what you have at what you perceive to be the most serious problems. And sometimes I remember in the Clinton days, for the feds, it was healthcare fraud. In the Bush days, at least Bush 43, it was national security. Every administration, came in under Rudy Giuliani at the U.S. Attorney's Office in New York. He wanted to make a priority of organized crime and drug enforcement. So everybody makes a political decision about what the most important crime priorities are. But within the four corners of any case, politics is not allowed to enter into it. In fact, some of my best friends who have been lifelong friends that I made at the U.S. Attorney's Office over 20 years were liberal Democrats. It never entered into the fact that we worked together, because you check your politics at the courthouse door. It just doesn't enter into, or at least is not supposed to enter into, decisions about who gets prosecuted, who doesn't get prosecuted, and that sort of stuff.
Right.
And it seems the Democrats have set that on its head.
The power to prosecute is the power to destroy, as you know all too well, Andy. And look, some people need some destroying. I'm not saying that. I'm just saying that it clearly...
Yeah, guilty people.
Right, exactly.
But those are the ones that you can prove are guilty. But you're quite right. Some people do need destroying, and it's perfectly good to go about that if they're the kind of people who are doing real evil.
Right. Well, but that's also, Andy. But that brings me to the center of this whole case, which is this comes from the left's just complete maniacal hatred of the Citizens United decision. They've set up these sort of strange situations where you can give money, but it's not for an explicit political purpose. Then it's okay, but you can be advocacy for issues. And now they're saying, well, issues and political purposes are too close, so we're going to try to deal with this ourselves. But this is just an entanglement that the government is not really in a position to deal with. I mean, the First Amendment should be clear of all of this stuff, but they keep wanting to add regulation on top of campaign finance stuff. And I think we've seen with the IRS as well that they have a very limited ability to, one, act in these matters without politicization, and two, this is just very difficult stuff in general. What's political versus what's issue advocacy? I mean, the government shouldn't be in this game.
No, you're exactly right. And unfortunately, Buck, where this goes off the rails is, once again, the opposition allowing the left to win the principle and then think that they can just cut back at it. So, what this gets down to at the end is the left rejects the idea that speech and money are the same thing, and that, if you have money, you're allowed to use that money to have as much political speech as you want. What the left says is, we don't care that the First Amendment says that there shall be no restrictions on political speech. We resent the idea that some people have more money than others and therefore are able to get their speech out more than others, and we're going to regulate that. And instead of saying, oh, no, you don't, we're going to stay with the constitutional principle, the Republican opposition says, well, maybe we can stand a little regulation around the edges. And once you give them the principle, then you're in this kind of incoherent situation, which is exactly what you described, trying to parse the difference between politics and issue advocacy.
Right, and to make it a criminal matter as well, not an administrative matter, to me, just shows how far some of these partisan